My name's Kyle. I'm 33, and every year since I was old enough to drive, I've made the same 4-hour trip on December 24th. No matter how chaotic life got, job deadlines, breakups, missed flights, Christmas was non-negotiable. It was the one time I could convince myself that maybe we were still a real family, that the dysfunction was just noise, and underneath it, there was still warmth, still love. But this past year shattered that illusion like glass underfoot. It started off like it always did, with too much planning and not enough sleep. I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. wrapping the gifts I'd thoughtfully picked out for every kid, aunt, cousin, and yes, even my sister Laura. I always went all out. Toys that lit up, gift cards tucked into handmade cards, little things I remembered people mentioning in July. Things no one ever got me in return, not that I ever kept score. I didn't do it for the thanks. I did it because I believed that if I kept showing up, kept trying, someone would finally see me. The drive was long and icy, the kind that keeps you alert with both hands glued to the wheel. I pulled up to my sister's house at 3:42 p.m., still on time for dinner. The lights were on. The driveway was full. I could hear laughter through the closed windows. For a second, I smiled. It sounded like joy. I told myself the tight feeling in my chest was just nerves. I got out, straightened my jacket, and knocked. Laura opened the door. I'll never forget the look on her face. Not surprise, not delight, but mockery, thinly veiled behind a laugh that stabbed sharper than any insult. "Oh, you actually came," she said, tilting her head like I was some stray dog who wandered into the wrong backyard. I blinked. Of course I did. I texted you last week. You said, "This year's just for family," she interrupted, grinning like she was delivering the punchline to a joke no one had told me. Then she pulled the door halfway closed, leaned in slightly, and added, "Try to take the hint, Kyle." And then the door shut. Just like that. No Merry Christmas. No apology. Just me, my arms full of gifts, standing on a frozen porch while the muffled sounds of celebration hummed behind thick walls. I didn't knock again. I didn't scream or cry or call anyone. I just stood there for a second, the cold seeping into my bones, and nodded to myself. Like I'd finally heard something that had been whispered for years, only now it was being screamed. Then I turned around, walked back to my car, carefully set the gifts in the trunk, and started the engine. I didn't even make it to the highway before my phone buzzed. A message. From Jason. Laura's husband. Why would that loser even show up? I stared at the screen, frozen. You ever have a moment so surreal your brain doesn't even react right away? I thought maybe it was a mistake. A prank. But no. It was clearly meant for someone else, probably Laura. Probably part of a long thread of jokes at my expense. And that's when the silence cracked. Not outside, that was still the quiet hum of tires on snow. But inside me, something fractured in that moment. Something old and tired and stretched too thin for too long. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't burn. I just smiled. A small, quiet smile. Because Jason, the man who once cried to me over beers when he lost his job, must have forgotten who'd been quietly paying their utilities for the last 8 months. Laura must have forgotten who co-signed the loan that let them refinance their house at a better rate. And they both must have thought I was just going to keep doing it. Forever. Without boundaries. Without self-respect. They were wrong. I pulled into a gas station lot, parked, and pulled out my laptop. I didn't even need to think twice. I logged into every account I managed, their electricity, gas, internet, even that fancy family Spotify premium I'd been covering. One by one, I removed my payment methods. Canceled autopay. I even revoked access to the Amazon Prime account I'd foolishly shared. Then I opened the loan dashboard and began the process to legally remove myself as a cosigner, which wouldn't be easy, but it was in motion now. A tide that wouldn't stop. And then I waited. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, my phone had 14 missed calls. I ignored them. I took a long shower, heated up some leftover Chinese food, and for the first time in years, I watched a movie on Christmas Eve without pretending to laugh at someone else's jokes or forcing a smile through gritted teeth. I felt hollow, but also calm, like my spine had grown back without me realizing it. Around midnight, the calls ramped up. 31, 38, 44. By 2 a.m., it was over 50. At 3:17 a.m., a message popped up, this time from Laura. Just 3 words. We need to talk. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Because for once, I wasn't scrambling to fix what they broke. I wasn't jumping in to protect the very people who had made it their tradition to humiliate and isolate me under the banner of family. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, thinking about every quiet moment over the years when I'd brushed something off, when I'd excused a dig as a joke, when I'd blamed myself for being too sensitive after hearing whispers that I wasn't successful enough, wasn't manly enough, wasn't needed. Turns out, they were right about one thing. I wasn't needed. And now, I was going to show them just how much they'd taken me for granted. But the best part? They had no idea just how deep my support had gone or how much more I still controlled. So I opened her message. We need to talk. No apology. No explanation. Just a demand, as if I owed her time, or attention, or access. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I genuinely didn't know what I'd say that wouldn't come out as a scream. I needed space. Distance. But even as I set my phone down and tried to close my eyes, more messages rolled in. One from Mom, one from Dad, even a vague one from my cousin Dylan, who never texts unless it's a birthday or a group photo. All of them danced around the same tone. Vague concern, mild panic, not a single ounce of ownership. Hey, sweetie, Laura said you left early. Everything okay? Can you call me when you get a sec? Not sure what's going on, but I think Jason's phone got hacked. Kyle, just call her. It's Christmas. It was never about me. Never about what I felt. Just patch it up, fix the optics, pretend everything's okay. That had been my role since I was 16, the peacemaker, the fixer, the one who understood why everyone else got to be cruel. At 6:41 a.m., the first real voicemail came in. It was Jason. Kyle, man. Look, that text, it wasn't meant for you. It was a joke, okay? Just between Laura and me. You know we love you, come on. And I don't know what's going on with the bills, but the gas company says the auto pay didn't go through, and Laura's mom is here and the kids are cold. Man. Just can you call me back? I didn't. I sat there and listened again. You know we love you. That's what people say when they love the benefits, not the person. Still, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. It wasn't satisfying, not really. It felt like standing on the edge of something. Not a cliff, but a choice. I could walk back into the cycle, play nice, accept the half apologies and watered-down lies. Or I could burn the script and finally stop pretending. I went with the latter. I took a deep breath, brewed some coffee, and opened a spreadsheet. It was time to document just how much I'd contributed. Not out of pettiness, out of clarity. I needed to see it all laid out. The mortgage co-signing, the utilities, the groceries, the Uber Eats gift cards when they just needed a little help this week. The emergency vet visit I covered when their dog got sick. The school supplies I bought for their oldest. The summer camp deposit I paid and never got a thank you for. By the time I was done, the total was just over $18,000 in the last 24 months. $18,000. Quietly paid, quietly justified. A slow bleed I hadn't even realized was happening because it always came with a "you're the only one who understands," or a "we'll pay you back once Jason's bonus hits," or a guilt-laced "it's just this once, we promise." That's when the real anger kicked in. Not the hot, screaming kind, the cold, clear kind. The kind that sharpens your thoughts into decisions. At 8:12 a.m., I finally texted Laura back. 3 words. Lose my number. No rage. No essay. Just the end of the leash. She replied instantly. Wait, what? Kyle, don't be dramatic. It was a misunderstanding. You know how Jason jokes. Then, a second later, you can't seriously be mad over this. It's Christmas. I almost laughed. That was the thing. I wasn't mad anymore. I was done. I didn't reply. Instead, I called the loan servicer. I explained the situation, asked for the cosigner release form. The woman on the line was kind, helpful, even empathetic. She told me that once I submitted proof that they had consistent income and made payments for a certain period, I could initiate the request to remove myself. It would be a process, but it was doable, and it was happening. By 10:30 a.m., I'd revoked every access point, streaming services, backup emails, joint accounts, even the DoorDash I stupidly left logged in on their devices. Then I logged into my email and forwarded them a spreadsheet. No note, no commentary, just raw numbers. Every dollar, every date, every receipt. I labeled the document, "Financial Dependency," for your records. And then I blocked them. All of them. Phone, email, socials, even my mom and dad, who I knew would eventually take Laura's side, like they always did when things got uncomfortable. I needed peace. I needed distance. And most of all, I needed to stop being the family's emotional and financial doormat. But I didn't stop there. Because what they still didn't know, what none of them remembered, was that the home they lived in, the one Jason bragged about refinancing, it wasn't in his name. It wasn't in Laura's name either. It was in mine. I had quietly bought out the remainder of our parents' old mortgage 3 years ago after Dad lost his pension and panicked. I kept the deed under a trust for tax reasons and, let's be honest, to keep things from falling apart. But Jason and Laura didn't care to read the fine print when they signed the paperwork. All they knew was the monthly payment got lower, the house didn't get foreclosed, and Uncle Kyle was so helpful. Now I was done being helpful, and I was ready to remind them exactly whose roof they were standing under. But first, I was going to wait, just long enough for the consequences to settle, for the calls to go from frantic to desperate. I waited, not out of cruelty, but because I knew them. I knew their rhythms, their patterns, the way they spun chaos into pity and pity into leverage. I knew that if I acted too fast, it would be all about me being spiteful or holding a grudge. But if I gave it time, just enough for the heat to turn into desperation, for the missed payments to add up, for the family chatter to shift from confused to concerned, the truth would reveal itself. And when it did, no one could accuse me of acting on impulse. They'd see it for what it was: consequence. By December 27th, the first domino fell. I was on my couch, still off work for the holidays, halfway through a documentary I wasn't really watching, when a message came through. A friend of mine from high school, Ashley, had posted on her story a screen recording. My sister, live on Facebook. I turned the volume up. "We've just had such a rough Christmas," Laura was saying, sitting on their couch, fake crying in that way only people who practice in the mirror do. "The kids don't understand why the Wi-Fi is down. Jason's been on hold with the power company for 2 hours. It's a lot, you know? And family's supposed to be there when times are hard. But not everyone has that." In the comments, hearts, prayers, sympathy. I took a sip of my coffee. Not once did she mention my name. Not once did she admit to what they'd said or done. It was pure theater. All vibes, no accountability. And it was working. People were offering to send gift cards, Venmo donations. Someone even asked for their Amazon wish list. I didn't say anything, but I saved the clip. December 29th, Jason called me from an unknown number. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, he left a voicemail. "Kyle, listen, I don't know what you're doing or what you think you're proving, but this is getting out of hand. The mortgage company called. They said they can't speak to me directly, that you're still the listed owner. I thought we signed everything over 3 years ago, man. You said it was handled." Pause. "You can't just ignore us. You're leaving your nieces in the dark in the middle of winter. Be an adult and call me back." The entitlement practically oozed from his voice. That's when I knew they didn't just assume I'd never pull the plug. They genuinely believed they were owed my silence, my money, and my name. That after everything, I was the one in the wrong for no longer funding their lives. That night, I logged into the property trust portal and reviewed the lease clause I had drafted but never used, a clause that allowed for transfer or removal of tenants with a 30-day notice in the event of breach of verbal agreement or abuse of occupancy. I had documented everything: the emails, the agreements, even the text from Laura asking me not to tell the others I was helping with bills, because she didn't want them to think Jason couldn't provide. I had receipts, literal and emotional, but I still hadn't pulled the final lever. I wasn't looking to destroy them. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of revenge. I just wanted them out of my life, cleanly, clearly, with no room left for return. That moment came on January 2nd. I was eating lunch when I got a knock on my apartment door. I opened it, surprised. It was Mom. She looked exhausted. Puffy eyes. Red cheeks. She was holding a paper shopping bag full of something, I assumed guilt. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer right away. Then I stepped aside. She sat down, slowly, like someone preparing to deliver a speech they hadn't rehearsed. I stayed standing. "I didn't know," she began. "I didn't know they were treating you like that. I didn't know you were paying all that." I said nothing. "They said you'd overreacted, that you just got your feelings hurt and were lashing out." I raised an eyebrow. "And you believe them?" She looked down. At first, there was a long silence. Then she added, "Your father and I have been talking. We're sorry. Truly. And we understand if you need space." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then she reached into the bag and handed me a small stack of envelopes. Letters. Drawings from the kids. A handmade card from Laura. written in glitter pen like it was 2005. We miss you. Please come back. They're hurting, Kyle. I sighed. I'm sure they are. But they weren't hurting when they laughed in my face. They weren't hurting when Jason called me a loser. She flinched. You raised her, Mom. But I'm done raising them. She didn't try to argue. She just nodded slowly and stood. As she left, she paused at the door. You know they'll lose the house. I nodded. Maybe that's what it takes for them to grow up. And then she was gone. That night, I began the eviction paperwork. Not in a blaze of vengeance. Not with glee or spite. Just with the calm hand of someone who'd carried a family on his back long enough. I gave them the full 30 days, filed it legally, and even waived any back payment. I wasn't trying to make them homeless. Just free. And maybe free myself too. But the morning after they got the notice, that's when everything changed. That's when Jason showed up. At my door. Red-eyed. Silent. And he wasn't alone. Jason stood at my doorstep like a man who'd finally realized the house was on fire and he'd been holding the match the whole time. Behind him, just a few paces back, was Laura. No makeup, no fake smile, no glitter-covered apology card, just silence, her arms crossed, jaw tight like she was biting down every word she wanted to scream but knew better. For a moment, none of us said anything. Then Jason exhaled, slowly. We're not here to fight, he said. I swear. I raised an eyebrow but didn't move from the doorway. He looked over his shoulder at Laura, who avoided my eyes, then back at me. We need to talk. I stepped aside wordlessly, more out of curiosity than kindness. They walked in like guests at their own funeral, slow, heavy steps, eyes darting around my apartment like they couldn't believe I lived in a space that didn't revolve around them. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel it. All of it. The weight of their choices. The consequences finally catching up. We got the notice, Jason said finally, sitting on the edge of my couch like it might disappear beneath him. And we didn't realize how bad, we'd messed up. I nodded once, just enough to say go on. I thought he broke off, then tried again. I thought you'd always be there. I guess I took that for granted. You didn't guess, I said. You knew. And you counted on it. Laura finally looked up. Her voice was tight. We never meant to push you away. I tilted my head. That's rich coming from the person who literally shut the door in my face. She flinched. I thought you'd laugh it off. Like you always do. You're the strong one, Kyle. I nearly laughed at that. Strong? No, I was just tired. Tired of swallowing it. Of being the bigger person. Of being the family ghost, only visible when someone needed money, a ride, a bailout. Jason leaned forward. Look, man, I messed up. The text, it was cruel. And I can't take it back. But I need you to know. I need to say it out loud. I'm sorry. He met my eyes. For once, he wasn't trying to charm or joke or manipulate. He looked broken. And not because he cared about me, but because the scaffolding of his life, the one he thought I'd hold up forever, had finally collapsed. Laura reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled envelope. My handwriting. The one I'd sent with the spreadsheet. We looked through everything. I didn't realize how much you'd done. I don't even remember half those payments. And I didn't want to remember. Because it was easier to believe you were just doing fine. I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say. They'd known. Deep down, they'd known. But they'd chosen convenience over conscience. For years. We talked to the kids, Laura said, her voice shaking slightly. Told them we might have to move. Maybe in with my parents. Jason's picking up extra shifts. I applied for a second job. And I asked. And we're going to figure it out, she said. Jason nodded. You were right to pull the plug. We didn't appreciate you. We used you. And we're not here to beg you to undo anything. We just wanted to say it. They stood. I watched them head to the door, and just before they stepped out, Laura turned back. I hope you find peace, Kyle. You deserve it. And then they were gone. I stood alone in my apartment, letting their words settle, letting the tension leave my shoulders one breath at a time. That was the closure I hadn't expected, not groveling or denial, but quiet acceptance. Maybe they really were going to change. Maybe they wouldn't. But for once, it didn't matter. Because their future wasn't my burden to carry anymore. The next 30 days passed without incident. No tantrums. No legal threats. No sudden emergencies to delay the inevitable. Jason emailed me once to confirm a date to move out, and I responded with the formal acknowledgement. That was it. On January 31st, I got a final confirmation from the property manager that the house was vacated, keys returned, and utilities fully transferred out of my name. I stared at the email for a long time. It felt surreal. 3 years of quiet sacrifice. 18 grand. Countless dinners endured, birthdays ignored, backhanded compliments, and silent humiliations. And now it was over. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it. I didn't throw a party. I just closed my laptop, poured myself a drink, and let the stillness wash over me. That weekend, I took a short trip to the coast. Alone. No itinerary. No guilt. I walked along the sand, let the wind numb my face, and sat by the cliffs with a journal I hadn't touched in years. I wrote down one thing. You can stop trying to earn love that should have been freely given. That line hit harder than I expected. 3 months later, I got a card in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of my nieces holding a sign. Thank you, Uncle Kyle. We miss you. There was a note in Laura's handwriting beneath it. We're okay. Not perfect, but okay. Thank you for forcing us to grow up. Love always, even if from a distance. I didn't cry, but I smiled. Sometimes closure doesn't come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from walking away and knowing you don't have to carry the weight anymore. I placed the card in a drawer and went back to my life. My new life. One with clear lines. One where my value wasn't tied to my wallet or my willingness to endure. And I never drove 4 hours for Christmas again. That year, I stayed home. And I was exactly where I needed to be.